All right, everybody, we are back with a deck video, kind of a how-to guide on this time around mid-range Frostbite. And, you know, I guess nobody's really surprised as of late, but this is basically the #1 deck played. So I figured I'd get back into the swing of things with a deck that is basically the most popular deck in the format as it currently stands. So, as always, everybody, if you're new to the channel, do not forget to hit that subscribe button. We got tons of Legends of Runeterra content. And if you like the video, hit that like button. But more importantly, if you have any comments, any feedback, questions after watching this video, put them in the comments below so I can go ahead try to answer them. As for the video, we are going to use our normal format of going through the deck first. So we're going to go through the deck list and all of the card choices in it, followed by 2 games in which I will kind of walk you through some of my decisions in those games. So without further ado, let's get into how to play the mid-range Frostbite deck. All right, guys, so here is the deck itself, and I'm not going to lie, this is not rocket science. This particular version of the deck is a very common version. There's a few different changes you can make, which we'll go over in a second. But for the most part, this is a mid-range Frostbite deck, and basically what you're going to see on ladder and also in tournaments. All right, so what is the main goal and purpose of this deck? Well, basically, what you want to do is maintain a larger tempo than your opponent has throughout most of the early to mid game. How do we do that, you might ask? Well, Omen Hawk, best tempo card in the game, in my opinion, as far as 1-drops are concerned, gives the top 3 followers or champs +1/+1 in your deck. So if you are able to draw one in the following turn or two, that will usually be a huge tempo swing. The Dream, Omen Hawk, buffing a Reckless Trifarian. A 3-cost 6/5 seems okay. Just saying, just throwing that out there. Same thing with Avarosian Trapper. If you are able to Omen Hawk into an Avarosian Trapper for a 3-cost 4/4, followed by the 1-mana 5/5 that you get in the Enraged Yeti after you drop the Trapper to the board, yeah, you're chilling. You're doing pretty good as far as tempo is concerned. Not many decks that your opponent's going to play are able to keep up in tempo with 5/5s, 6/5s, 4/4s, 3/3s that early on in the game. Now, early on in the game, as we just mentioned, all of those high tempo cards, you are usually just going to want to be playing those down to the field. An example, you know, you compare this to something like Bannerman. You have a 2-mana follower, you play it on turn 2. You have a 3-mana follower, you play it on turn 3. Generally, that's how you want to go with the early game with this deck as well. However, there are going to be turns where you need to decide whether or not you want to hold open some spell mana for stuff like Elixir of Iron, like Brittle Steel, especially Elixir of Iron. Elixir of Iron will sometimes give you that much needed advantage over some decks playing a lot of removal, i.e. a lot of the Ezreal decks floating around out there. They try to Mystic Shot or gotcha or get excited or something on one of your followers. You can go ahead and save it with an Elixir of Iron. Another popular save would be Trifarian Glory Seeker with it only having 1 health. If they do decide to try to static shock it when you're trying to pull something that maybe you Brittle Steeled, you can go ahead and Elixir of Iron your Glory Seeker to save it as well. So lots of plays available with Elixir of Iron. One of the better 1-cost spells in the game as well as far as combat tricks are concerned. So you always want to consider keeping that available when you are playing followers. Now, what happens when you start playing a bunch of stuff to the board, your opponent has removal, you kind of run out of steam? Well, this card is a thing. And if you don't know what this card is by now, y'all gotta get with it, because this card is absolutely redonkulous. I cannot tell you how many times I have casted a tournament game and this puppy draws 3, 4, sometimes, yes, 5 cards, and technically can even draw 6 if it is buffed itself with Omen Hawk or something like Avarosian Hearthguard, which we'll get into in a second because this deck is not playing that. So yeah, once you need, you know, a little more draw power, you need to reload your hand a little bit, you pop one of these puppies down. Reckless Trifarian will get you a draw. Ash will get you a draw. Most of the stuff in this deck will get you a draw, even without being buffed by Omen Hawk. Trifarian Glory Seeker, another cheap way to get draw out of Trifarian Assessor as well. Now, here's where the deck gets a little different in regards to how people decide to build it. See here that we have 3 Kato the Arm. Now, this clearly means we're going for a little bit more of an aggressive route. You also see, obviously, the Captain Farron, which I'll explain a little more in a bit as well. So Kato the Arm a lot of times can be replaced by Avarosian Hearthguard. Another great 5-drop. Avarosian Hearthguard also increases obviously everything else in your deck. It does something like increase Trifarian Assessor no matter what, 2/5 attack, meaning that it is always going to draw off of itself. So Hearthguard is definitely a good consideration for this deck. However, I personally like the more aggressive version. I do think it's a little bit better. I think that at the end of the day, generally speaking, even if you are playing Hearthguard, this deck still wants to be the aggressor in most matchups. If it's going head-to-head against a mid-range deck like Bannerman, it wants to be the aggressor. Obviously, it's going to have larger units to trade with the Bannerman deck as well. If you're going against a control deck, normally you're going to want to be the aggressor. Actually, pretty sure always you're going to want to be the aggressor. And control decks especially, you have kind of a clock to win the game. If you don't win fast enough, generally speaking, you're going to run out of steam, and the control deck will have way too many options. And that is one of the reasons why Captain Farron is in here. So I do like the aggressive approach to this deck. I think the 3 Kato the Arm is much better than the Hearthguard, in my personal opinion. Harsh Winds, obviously a very good card as far as combat tricks are concerned. And then we have a Reckoning in here as well, which Reckoning honestly has become less useful since it was originally put in this deck. I used to see people running 2 of it a lot. But a lot of times in tournaments now, you're seeing it dead in people's hands. So not always the best choice as far as removal is concerned. But obviously, if you can get it off, still a good card nonetheless. 3 Sejuani, no brainer. Captain Farron. Okay. Captain Farron. Oh boy. This card is, I think, a requirement in this deck. Even if you're running the 3 Hearthguard, I think you do need to at least have 1 Captain Farron. I have a lot of times played 2 Captain Farron. Captain Farron gives you that extra reach that you need to win the games when you do start running out of steam. So let's say you've played a Trifarian Assessor, but your opponent is still dealing with all your options. While you're doing that, while you're attacking, developing a board, they're dealing with your options, you're probably dealing some damage, especially if you have Kato the Arm on the field, or you're able to get a Reckless Trifarian attack through or something like that. So, you know, they might be at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 health. Well, that's fine, because you can finish them off with a Captain Farron. The good thing about Captain Farron is that when you play it late game, your opponent is immediately on at least a 2-turn clock, if not sooner, depending on what their health is at, because you can get 2 Decimate off in a turn. Rip 4-mana Decimate, otherwise we'd be able to get 3 off in a turn. But yeah, so this card is absolutely astronomically important in so many matchups to give you that extra little bit of reach you need to finish out the games. And one last thing I do want to mention before we go ahead and get into the gameplay, Ash. When Ash levels up, not only do you get a Crystal Arrow, but more importantly, your opponent's Frostbitten followers and champions cannot block. And this, a lot of times, I wouldn't say a lot of times, I'd say most of the time you're winning with Captain Farron or just, you know, overwhelming your opponent with, you know, so much tempo. But there's a lot of times you can level up this Ash and get a very, like, sudden OTK turn with Ash. You know, your opponent might be at like 18 health or something, but you have a leveled Ash on the board with a Reckless Trifarian, and all of a sudden you drop a Kato the Arm, and now your opponent's just dead. And honestly, right there, you add that up, Ash plus a Reckless Trifarian plus Kato, that's 19 damage to the face with no blockers. I mean, that's 3 units with a potential almost 20-0. And when you do have an Ash leveled up like that, things like that can totally happen. They can totally swing a game in your favor, even if you're falling behind. So that is something to keep in consideration when you are playing this deck. So enough of me blabbering on. Let's get into a couple games of the most played deck right now in this format. All right, guys. So we're getting started here. Going up first against Freljord Shadow Isles in a kind of a Nivea control deck. I don't actually ever see a War Mothers come out here, so I'm not sure if it is War Mothers, but I imagine it is some sort of War Mothers control. But you are going to see how fast this deck can actually win. I mean, these games don't go too long as far as the mid-range Frostbite deck is concerned. You know, obviously this deck we're going up against, a control deck, wants to go into the late game, and we don't. We want to win as quickly as possible. So you can see here we're already trying to you know, kind of be the aggressor. Our opponent having 2 Avarosian Sentries is actually pretty good for them because it gives a free chump blocker to, you know, they just block the Avarosian Trapper. You know, they're able to get the 2 chip damage in because I obviously don't want to lose my units attacking. So it just kind of puts us in a weird spot. Now, we do still have plenty of aggression in our hand, though. We do have the Kato the Arm. We do have the Reckless Trifarian. I decide to go with the Reckless Trifarian to possibly keep the Culling Strike open, as well as the Flash Freeze if I play the Ash. Obviously the Vengeance ends up killing the Ash, so I don't actually have the Flash Freeze anymore. But we are able to push through 3 damage. And again, I gotta stress, in this sort of matchup, this control type matchup, you need to be the aggressor. We need to kill them before they're able to stabilize. Anivia is not something you want to deal with after turn 10 when it's enlightened. It becomes very difficult to win the game at that point. So we do want to work on trying to get it off the field as quickly as possible. This block, Yetis are great for getting rid of these Anivias early on. Our opponent obviously attacked there. We were able to block it. Not sure if that was probably smart on their part, but they did it, and we made out from it. And, all right, listen. This Trifarian Assessor looks juicy, all right? Myself and Boulevard have joked about this while casting. How big of an Assessor is this? This is a giant Assessor. Listen, generally speaking, a 3-draw Assessor you want to take. Anything more than that's a little bit greedy. I decided to go and play the Ash because I do have this Elixir of Iron here, and the Ash is going to Frostbite this Rekindler. So I do have the chance, with my opponent only being at 1 mana, to actually keep all of my units alive and potentially get even more draw out of my Assessor here. And I go for it. Honestly, there's really only one punish here, and the worst case scenario is my opponent plays a Ruination on the following turn because they will have exactly 9 mana. The problem is if they go for the Ruination, it also kills their Anivia and it gives them no mana to play anything else, which leaves them pretty open for an attack. And they were at 3 health. So that's obviously something they can't do, which is why I'm okay with taking the risk, going all in on the Assessor. And worst case scenario now, he just vengeances something else. And it is what it is. We still get 3 draws off the Assessor. But instead, we greed the hell out of this Assessor. And oh man, God, does it feel good to draw that many cards in 1 turn off of 1 card. God, it's such a broken card when you really think about it. So we do end up, basically at this point, you can see, we haven't even gotten to turn 10 yet. And we're basically winning the game. I think turn 9 here is when we're able to put it away. And this is exactly what you want to be doing against a deck like this. As long as you're able to win by turn 8 or 9, you should be golden. We were able to be aggressive enough here to put our opponent within lethal by turn 8 or 9. I think they surrender right after I go ahead and make this egg vulnerable because there's not really much they can do. So we go ahead and take it away there. That is a perfect example, though, of how to play against a straight-up control deck. This deck is, generally speaking, it's called Yasuo Control, but I think it plays more towards the side of mid-range than anything with some of the units that it does have. Yasuo is inherently kind of a mid-range unit as well. It's just, stuns are kind of a control-y type thing, right? So we start here with the Omen Hawk. God, it always feels so good to draw Omen Hawk first turn. That is basically what you want to mulligan for. That is the best possible turn 1 play that you can get, and you literally always play it. I can't actually think of a reason why you wouldn't play it first turn. If anybody wants to comment below with a reason, go for it. So we do also have here the Trifarian Glory Seeker. Now, this card is great when paired with things like Brittle Steel or even Elixir of Iron. Elixir of Iron is able to save it from something like a Static Shock or anything really that's trying to target it and kill the card. We do see a Brittle Steel come up here. So now we have the option of basically challenging and killing anything on the field. So what I'm thinking about now is possibly open attacking. I decide to go ahead and put the aggression on with the Reckless Trifarian. Again, because we're playing against more of a control type deck, like I said, it's more on the side of mid-range, but it is a slower deck than ours is what I'm getting at. Because we're playing against a deck that's slower than ours, we want to be the aggressor and we want to be way faster than they can actually respond to. So I go ahead and pull this Fey Blade Twirler. The reason why I don't play the Brittle Steel yet is because I know my opponent is going to block, and I'm hoping that it's going to bait out a spell before I actually play the Brittle Steel. It does, so I am able to get this Fey Blade Twirler killed ASAP. They keep the Crimson Disciple, but God, it feels so much better to have a Crimson Disciple live now that it only does 1 damage. I'm not going to lie. So I actually don't even really care about that. It's not a big deal. This Yasuo coming down is a big deal. It's something that might end up being a problem. Now, here's the thing. We do have a Sejuani. Sejuani is going to be able to get rid of the Yasuo for us, but we also have a Captain Farron that we've had for quite some time now. The goal is to get this Captain Farron to win the game here. As long as I can do enough damage to get my opponent to 12, they don't have heal. Or generally speaking, this deck is not going to play any kind of heal, right? Now, the other thing I want to note is this Sejuani. If you have the attack token on 6 and you have a Sejuani in hand, you're almost like required to play the Sejuani. I know it feels kind of bad to play it into your opponent having, you know, probably more mana than you at that point, because obviously you're expending 6 mana first, but it's almost always the right play. She's a very beefy unit. It's going to be very hard for your opponent to actually remove her from the field, regardless of how much mana they have. Something like a Thermo Beam would be one of the only things that can do it, or a Vengeance. And if that's the case, on turn 6, your opponent is using all, or at least all of but 2 mana, if it's a Vengeance, to get rid of your Sejuani. So almost always the right play. We are able to get a ton of damage through on that turn and put our opponent down to 7, which is well within range of Captain Farron. So at this point, all I actually care about now is getting these decimates off. I shut down my opponent's attack turn on the previous turn, which means I pretty freely am able to just play Captain Farron now. Actually kind of glad that my Omen Hawk got killed there, so I had some free space. Not gonna lie, I probably would have killed it anyways to play the Farron, and on top of that, I have a diesel attack right now. One of the things people forget about Captain Farron, yeah, that puppy's got Overwhelm. It's, you know, you don't just get 3 decimate, you get an 8/8 with Overwhelm on the field. Like, that alone is like worth 8 mana in my book. And 8 mana, 8/8 with Overwhelm, that's 8 mana. On top of that, you get 3 cards. You get 3 cards in hand. It's busted, all right? All right, maybe not busted, but considerably better than Captain Farron used to be. And because we now have 3 decimate in our hand, I mean, to boot, obviously, this Sejuani attack is going to get through. Because we have the 3 decimate, we win this game. All right, everybody, that is it for this mid-range Frostbite video. If you haven't tried or played this deck yet, you got to do it. This thing is everywhere. Most of the tournaments we've casted as of late, this is probably in like the 20% play percentage, right? Which is basically most people have it in their lineup. I think this the PCS tournament that we casted this past weekend, 6 out of the top 8, 6 people in the top 8 actually had a mid-range Frostbite in their lineup. It's a very core, integral strategy, or integral part of people's strategy for the most part at most tournaments. So definitely give it a shot, try it out. Don't forget to subscribe if you guys like this video, or if you're just new to the channel, hit the like button. And as always, everybody, stay healthy, stay positive. I hope it just works for you, and peace out.